Hello, welcome to the Burda Podcast. This episode features musician and artist Faraj Abyad. The conversation is about Faraj's music, his perspective, and why he's excited to be a part of the Burda Festival. This podcast is powered by Afikra in collaboration with the Burda Festival from the Ministry of Culture and Youth in the United Arab Emirates. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. So welcome to the podcast. Thanks for making the time.
Of course. It's an honor to be here. And I'm really excited about this collaboration. Thank you, Afikra, for bringing me on today. And I'm excited to kind of bridge the worlds of the U.S. with the U.S. mission to the world of the UAE with the UAE Ministry of Culture. And I'm excited for these performances we have coming up. And excited to get into kind of my background and my approach towards my art and my work.
Sure.
Thank you for having me today.
Of course. I want to talk a little bit about something that surprised me. You grew up playing violin.
Yeah.
And I'm always surprised by folks who start on one instrument and then become excellent at another. I grew up playing classical trumpet and took that very seriously, and then started playing piano probably at the age of like 16. But I never became a professional musician at either of them. When you started playing oud, did you feel like you had found a bond with the instrument that you didn't find with violin?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the oud lends itself to singing more than any other instrument in the Oriental or the Arabic music system. So, I was playing the violin for many years. I was playing behind many great singers, great Arabic singers living here in the US. And I always preferred to sing, but it was always hard to kind of balance the two, holding the violin, the technique. It's a little tricky to be able to sing and play at the same time. Even like the register of the voice is so close to the violin, so they don't exactly complement each other when you only have violin and only singing. Whereas the oud, even if you're missing the rest of the orchestra, the oud, has a different register than the voice, it's slightly lower, and it complements it so beautifully. Besides from the fact that it's very comfortable to sing and play this instrument, it's almost like the Western equivalent of the guitar, So
The singer-song, the quintessential singer-songwriter thing.
Yeah, and especially to me as a composer, I was composing a lot on the violin as well. And the Arabic music that I focus on is very singing focused and focuses on the poetry, pre-Islamic to modern day Arabic poetry. So, the words are very important. And the oud, again, by complementing the singing, it allowed me to compose more comfortably as well.
Yeah. So if you were to sort of introduce your work to a classroom of teenagers that were not familiar with music of the Arab world, whether they were a classroom of teenagers in Australia or in Beijing or in Mozambique or in Bogota or in Baltimore, how would you sort of introduce the music that you play?
That's a great question. I mean, to try to find like an international language on how to explain what I do. It's hard because not all cultures share the same approach as Arabic or traditional classical Arabic music, especially in composing. Like, for example, it's very common and known even amongst non-musicians in the Arab world that the composer takes a poem that's dear to him or takes a poem that was given to him by a master poet, and then he composes music around it. And that this is the relationship that you have the poet who his expertise is poetry and the composer who his expertise is music, and they kind of combine those knowledge. And then, of course, you have like arrangers. In Arabic music, it's common that there's an arranger. So it's almost like these three people collaborating to create the work of art. Whereas in, let's say here in the States where I grew up, it's very, the most common way that people write music or composers write music today, especially in the more contemporary world, is that whoever's writing the music writes the words as well. And so then it's very foreign to them, the concept of the three partners, coming together to write this song. So somehow, I guess I'd have to break down the system and, let the students know, okay, well, first it starts off with the poem, and then the poem has its own rhythm. So then we place some sort of time signature or some sort of a rhythmic pattern that complements the poem. Then the composer has to have this knowledge of a musical system that's based on maqamat, which are musical modes that often have quarter tones and that are much more vast than the Western music system. And depending on where I am, like let's say I'm in India, so I would explain differently than if I was in the States, because Indian music has many similarities to Arabic music and also has a vast amount of scales and divisions of tonalities. So it's kind of a loaded question. I'm trying to figure out how I would approach it in a way that if there was an international audience, how to bring this to everyone, this concept. But that's basically the idea, and then we place the maqam. That would be the next step. And then the final step is kind of to have some sort of inspiration, or at least for me, my personal approach, of course, there are so many technicalities and so many things that we had to study and learn to be able to execute this music or compose this music beautifully. But in the end of the day, there's the inspiration aspect or the spiritual aspect, the creative aspect, which is something that can't be learned. It's something that has to come from you. And I guess it's almost the most important ingredient. And it's the most internationally shared ingredient because, yes, maybe in other countries or other cultures, they have different steps or technical means to getting the final result in the composition or the music. But within all these cultures, when you're creating, you need this inspiration, and this can be shared throughout cultures. So, yeah.
So I want to dig into the poetry a little bit. It's so funny. If you had asked me that question, I wouldn't have been able to guess the way you described it. I wouldn't have thought that the poem is really the thing that sets the table. Can you think of a poem that comes to mind that can be a good example of this process?
That's a great question.
It could be an original or a classic poem that really exemplifies this process.
That's a great question. I think there's an example I have through my own work would be a poem that I took from a great poet from Kuwait. Her name is Maysoon al-Suwaidan. She has this beautiful quote where she says, لولاك ما طربت أذني لأغنية لولاك ما عذبت قلبي معانيها. So basically the translation of this is like, if it wasn't for you, my ear wouldn't achieve this musical ecstasy that when I listen to a song. Without you, my heart or my emotions wouldn't feel the meaning of this song. So almost like, when you're in love, when you listen to a song, that song means so much more because you're actually going through it, which is so beautiful. And the way that the rhythmic pattern of this poem is like this, like لولاك ما طربت أذني لأغنية. Like it has this, to me, as the composer, and everyone can see it differently, but to me, I felt like it was being divided in threes. So I used a rhythm that's divided in threes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And, most rhythms in Arabic music and Western music as well are divided in 4. So I kind of took this as an opportunity to be creative and use a rhythm that's divided into 3. And, we have lots of rhythms that are in 3. For example, like the waltz, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 in Western music. In Moroccan music, we have this amazing 3 rhythm that's like something very funky. So I decided to play with this concept. And so then when I sang it, it came out something like this. لولاك ما طربت أذني لأغنية لولاك ما عذبت قلبي معانيها لولاك ما سرحت عيني ولا ضحكت واستغرب الناس حولي ما الذي فيها لولاك ما طرب 1, 2, 3 1, 2, 3. And then once you have the 3, you can play with all these rhythms that are divided in 3, and it's very exciting. Almost every culture has its own rhythm divided in 3.
Interesting.
And of course, I like to pull from Arabic culture to preserve the Oriental tradition of rhythms.
Yeah. So, is that a contemporary poem?
Yes. Yeah. It was written, within, this decade, I would assume.
Yeah.
Maysoon's a very young poet, and she's really a prodigy in her work. And that's another interesting thing about Arabic poetry that maybe isn't as familiar to non-Arab audiences, that because the Arabic language is so rich and so complex, the poetry as well is a big part of this. So much of the Arabic language is based on the Quran, which has such a deep tradition of, grammar and rhyme and rhythm. And so this translates as well into the tradition of poetry, which actually came pre-Islam as well. And part of this tradition is that the poems should have a meter. They should have a poetic meter. And the poet has the ability to choose any of these meters, but once they choose the meter that they're going to use, they have to stick to this throughout. And this is metered poetry. Of course, there's free poetry as well. For example, the great Mahmoud Darwish was known to write beautiful free poetry, but he had a strong education in metered poetry as well.
Yeah, he was breaking rules he understood.
Exactly. And this is something in art I always lean towards, is that, I love the idea of breaking the rules as long as we know the rules and the traditions beforehand, which is my approach.
I think it was John Coltrane. I think it's usually associated to him, where he says, learn all the scales, learn all the rules. Once you learn them all, you can forget them all.
Yes. And that's so beautiful. And I think it's true within poetry as well. Though I think still there's this tradition where, every so often, I'm not an expert in poetry. My expertise is more in the music side of things. And I have kind of this group of incredible poets that I always refer to, get their professional opinion when I'm choosing poetry to compose, or even after I compose, to make sure that I'm being loyal to what's happening in the poetry, or loyal to the rhythms or to the meanings. So sometimes, I present them with a poem and they're like, oh, well, the concept behind this poem is amazing and original, but the rhythm is broken in the 5th sentence. So maybe you shouldn't use this poem because, we're trying to preserve the standard of this beautiful tradition of metered poetry. So me as the composer, I'm always trying to balance this, like, when am I willing to have the poem not be as perfect as maybe it should be for the sake of the music, or which poems I should be choosing. Should I be composing in free poetry? These are all interesting conversations.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's this, I think if somebody walked by a performance of yours, or if they were, listening to YouTube or Spotify or Anghami or something like that, and they hear one of your songs, they would say, I think, oftentimes, "Oh, this is classical Arabic music." And I think those three words, I would imagine, can be confining, maybe feel confining. And I'm wondering, maybe they don't to you. Do you feel
that's
like
a great question.
classical Arabic music restricts an evolution that you're yearning to create, or is that fully something I'm projecting onto you? And you think, no, what are you talking about? The possibilities are endless.
Well, I see that as a compliment that they would hear my music that way, because I love classical Arabic music. And it's kind of my inspiration for my whole project, really. Though, yes, I believe that it's important that we evolve it, or maybe the word evolve implies we're improving it, but I don't see it that way. I see every generation of this music having something different that's gorgeous. Like the classical Arabic music in the 20s is a school within itself. The 30s and so on until today. And I think that, I'd like to hope that the music that I'm producing, or the newly composed music that I'm working on within this genre, has something that's different. And not that you can compare my work to the work of Muhammad Abdel Wahab or Riyad al-Sanbati or all these great classical Arabic composers. But I'd like to hope that, that the Faraj Abyad composition has something that reflects our generation, or reflects, some modern evolutions to music in general. So yeah, I would hope that they would see this, but the truth is I haven't been so experimental for someone to see this obviously yet, but I have some cool experimental ideas for the future later. Like, like one idea could be to have like a house DJ kind of like weaving rhythms into the composition, which is, something from music today, electric MIDIs and synthesizers and things like this, combined with the classical Arabic. Like this is something I have in mind for the future, to kind of bridge these worlds together. But lately, the way that I've been setting up the group is kind of the traditional setup. However, a lot of the musicians, like for example, we were talking about Layth Siddiq, previously, and he's an incredible musician who, of course, he's mastered the Arabic technique, but he's brought so much to this technique from studying jazz, classical, Indian,
and listening to hip hop and
yeah. So this, even though he might be performing, he's often the director in my musical programs here in New York. So even though maybe he's performing my compositions, which are traditionally based, in his playing, you'll very often hear some modern flavors. But this would kind of this is a less obvious taste of modernism than like throwing in MIDIs or throwing in, modern technology or something like that.
I want to talk a little bit. There's a couple of things I want to talk about, and maybe we can start with something you mentioned. You mentioned spirituality, and I'm curious if you feel like the music that you're playing and the art that you're making is a spiritual endeavor for you.
Oh yeah, definitely. And because in this music, the composer kind of, his expertise, like we said before, his expertise is the music, and then he looks somewhere else for the poetry or to other poets. So I'm always, but I have the complete autonomy as to which poems I'm choosing. So I'll specifically look for poems that resonate with me spiritually, or that I feel tell my story. So many of the ancient poets of the Arab world had their own stories, like incredible stories that we could relate to today, thousands of years later. Some of their stories are about romance, like most of what I'm composing is ghazal, which is like, romance, love. This is tarab, music in general, focuses on this genre of poetry in general, like love songs. However, I try to get creative sometimes and choose poems that have to do with coexistence or religion or someone's spiritual journey. Like there's so many poems like this from Ibn Arabi, so many Sufi poems or great Sufi poets who had these incredible philosophical journeys. And so this is kind of, I think, like a place where my compositions stand out, because a lot of people are afraid to compose these things. Like a lot of composers are worried to compose something that's not a love song or a love poem, because it's harder to capture an audience with like some philosophical idea.
Are you responding to that fear in the absence of that type of music, or is this something that just comes naturally to you and you don't have the fear?
What do you mean by that exactly?
You're saying a lot of other composers don't do this because it may be hard to do or hard to pull off, or audiences may not be able to connect with it. Are you responding to that? Or are you just saying, oh, this just comes naturally to me. I am naturally drawn towards talking, thinking, writing, and composing and creating in this vein?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both, but more the latter. It comes natural to me. I want to be able to tell a message through my art.
Can you give me an example of what one of those lyrics may be like, or just put a little more meat on the bone?
Yeah. So one of the songs that I'm going to be actually performing at Burda that I composed is from a very famous poem of Ibn Arabi, where he has his famous line, which is "Al-hubbu dini wa imani," which means love is my creed and my religion. And this is kind of a message of coexistence that, yes, there are many different religions or different cultural sects, and maybe they're all divided, but something we all share is love. And this can bring us together spiritually. And this is kind of a very Sufi concept. And it's a theme that runs throughout Sufi.
That was Ibn Arabi?
Yes.
Oh, I thought it was Bob Marley, but I guess it was both.
Yeah, I thought it was Bob Dylan, and then they told me it's Ibn Arabi.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, and, in the poem he says, قد كنت قبل اليوم أنكر صاحبي. In the beginning of time, I used to hate my fellow. إذا لم يكن ديني إلى دينه داني. If he wasn't the exact same religion as me. لقد صار قلبي قابلا كل صورة. But then all of a sudden my heart became open to accepting every image and everything. فمر عن لي غزلاني ودير لي رهباني, like the monasteries, and he starts creating this image of the gazelle, and this very spiritual kind of image. وبيت لأوثان وكعبة طائف وألواح تورة ومصحف قرآن. So he starts saying like even the idolaters or the idols, and even and even the holy place in Mecca, even the Torah, the tablets. I was looking for this word, tablet, and then the scrolls of the Quran. So he's like combining all the religions and all the heresy almost as well, because he's saying like even idolatry is somewhere where he feels spirituality. And then he goes on to say, أدين دين الحب أن توجهت ركائبه الحب ديني وإيماني. And the last line is, I kind of went on the spiritual journey. I came across all religions and all faiths, And what I realized in the end is that love is my religion. And this is such a beautiful message, and I think everyone can kind of resonate with this, especially in the Middle East, where there's so many religions and so many cultures, and we tend to think that we're all divided, because of what's happening today. But really, over 1,000 years ago, Ibn Arabi from Andalusian Spain, who was an Islamic philosopher, was like almost more advanced than so many of us today in his thought and his philosophy, which is so beautiful. And we kind of have this tendency to think that the old way of thinking is obsolete or not progressive, but in reality, in this case, it's so much more progressive than so much of what we're seeing today.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. It's interesting because, here you are, I'm speaking to you, you're in New York right now. In a few weeks, you're going to be, from the date of this recording, you're going to be hopping on a plane, going to the United Arab Emirates to be a part of this festival. And performing for an audience that you don't typically perform for. And so I'm curious what you expect once you sort of take the show on the road a little bit, and get in front of a sort of very transnational audience and play in the UAE. What do you expect? What are you excited about?
Yeah, well, the truth is I have no idea what to expect, because it's my first time performing in the region, and that's actually what makes it more exciting. And I have certain expectations, but maybe I'm completely wrong about them. So that'll be fun to see, how my expectations are broken as well. But I'm excited about it, especially because, here in the States, so much of my project is based around this poetry, and the audience, in order to appreciate what's happening, they kind of have to be familiar with these concepts. And so much of my audience in the States is Western or non-Arabic speaking. So there's always that, that struggle to have to translate things or to explain things, or who was this poet, where especially at Burda, so many of the guests will be way more well-versed in this stuff than me, myself, so it'll be really fun to perform these things in front of experts in the field. So it'll be nice to have the audience kind of understanding these concepts right away. And I'm hoping that because they have this deep understanding of the material being performed, that they'll enjoy it more. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens.
What's cool about your performance, and I was excited to find this out, is that you going to the festival is a part of a broader initiative from the U.S. State Department and the U.S. A partnership between the U.S. mission in the UAE and the UAE Ministry of Culture and Youth, who are the hosts of the entire festival. But it puts you in a unique position, unique for you at least, which is you are all of a sudden not a cultural ambassador for the Arab world in New York. All of a sudden you are a cultural ambassador for the U.S. in the region. Talk a little bit about how that hat change feels, and what are you sort of excited about in that sort of role reversal? All of a sudden, you're a representative of the U.S. and the sort of multitudes of the U.S. culturally, artistically, creatively in the UAE.
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and kind of the answer has to do with the story of how this all came about. I was in the UAE at the time, and someone reached out to me just by coincidence, it seemed, and from the U.S. mission, and they told me, we love your music, and you should apply to perform at Expo under the U.S. mission, and we select maybe 10% of the applicants or something like that, but we feel you have a great chance of being selected. And I told them, well, from my understanding is that the expo is a place where each mission, each country shares its culture. And I said, I don't know if I'm the best choice for this because my music isn't American at all. My music is Arabic. So yeah, I said, like, maybe it would make more sense if I'm a country singer or something like this. I said, are you sure that they would be interested in my project? And the person who was helping me at the time, she's Lebanese American, so she understood the music. And she told me, no, actually, بالعكس, it's ahsan, because you're showing that there's this beautiful Arab culture growing and, being shown in New York and in the US as a whole. So it's this beautiful kind of story showing the story of immigrants and, Arab immigrants to America. And kind of when she put it this way, I realized that it actually does tell a beautiful story. When I was in Lebanon recently, I met this incredible oud player. His name's Osama. And he was telling me, it's interesting to him to see my music and how it's evolving in the States. Like I never had this project in the Middle East. He said it almost has, even though it's completely Oriental and Middle Eastern, there's some sort of influence, like by the air in New York or the spiritual, like just like here in Lebanon, when I compose, I have the inspiration from al-jabal, tabi'a, ma ba'rif shu, So the same thing here in New York. Somehow I'm getting inspiration from being on the streets of the East Village or, walking through Brooklyn. And this is infused into my music. So even though this music is in no shape or form American.
Well, I actually would challenge you on that. I
would love to hear the challenge. Yeah.
No, I really hope that you walk away from this experience. I truly hope that you walk away from this experience embracing that you are making American music. I truly hope that you understand that. That these things can be two things at once. That, salsa music coming out of the Bronx is American music. And what you're doing is American music. And it's at once spiritually Islamic music, it's at once Arabic music, it's at once you're playing a string instrument, you're part of that genre. But I think that the idea that you are a cultural ambassador for both regions is a powerful idea that maybe you haven't begun to appreciate yet.
I think, yeah, I'm starting to just now I'm starting to appreciate it. Starting from that initial conversation with the US mission, she kind of, when we spoke about it, she kind of changed my perspective. And I was like, you know what? Yes, there is American influence to this music. Like you said, a Latin musician living in the Bronx, just by osmosis, he's going to be influenced by the New York culture, and so many of my teachers and mentors and who are all originally from Arab countries, so many of them studied here in New York or studied in Boston or studied in great music schools here in the States. And this changed their approach towards the Oriental music.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because I feel like there will be 1,000 Farajes in the audience who walk through the door not thinking that this is American music. And then, inshallah, walk out the door thinking, oh, wow, this is. And this music is of two places and is a transnational. There's transnationalism. There's something binding that crosses oceans and crosses borders in this art.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, something in my music that's in a way very American is the melting pot of influences. Especially New York is like a melting pot of cultures. Um, and we kind of have something unique here in New York. I don't know if you've spent time here.
Yeah. Yeah, I lived there for a long time.
Oh wow. Okay. So then you're very familiar with the fact that here in New York, if you go to like a Arab social event, for example, you'll meet Moroccans, you'll meet Algerians, you'll meet Lebanese, Khaliji, Syrian, Palestinian, and kind of all these places are coming together here in New York. Whereas if each one was living in their respective country, they might not meet so many diverse Arabs. And this diversity, just within the Arab culture in New York, which kind of New York allows for this to happen in a way, like being in the States allows for this mix of Arab cultures to happen. So this has influenced my music greatly because I have access to so many incredible Arab cultures through music from just my group of friends or my group of fellow musicians. Like if I've noticed that, for example, in my travels to Egypt or Lebanon, if I were to sing with an orchestra there, every single person in the orchestra pretty much would be Egyptian. Or if I was in Lebanon, everyone in the orchestra would be Lebanese. But here in New York, if I were to put an orchestra together of musicians, we don't have enough Lebanese musicians here in New York to make the full band Lebanese. We have to have maybe 3 musicians from Lebanon, 3 from Egypt, 2 from Morocco, and it becomes that each of those musicians brings their culture, and I start to learn from them.
Well, what I think is going to be interesting about this experience at Al Burda for you is the similar melting pot, right? And to be surrounded by artists and thinkers from, in this case, across the Islamic world, which is really in every single direction. So folks from Africa, folks from the Asian subcontinent, and folks from Europe, folks from North Africa, from the GCC, from the Levant, from the US, and really sort of having that similar experience at a different crossroads.
Yes. And this is actually why, during my last visit to the UAE, I felt, though it's different than New York, I felt so at home there because they have that melting pot of cultures there, which I'm so familiar with. And they kind of share that, the Arabizi, like the English and Arabic together, and this international language of English kind of bringing broader cultures together outside of the Arab world. So definitely, this is part of also what makes me excited for this upcoming performance, is that I feel, though I'm in a completely different crossroads, it's almost a similar kind of audience that I have here in New York.
Do you know anything about some of the other musicians and thinkers and folks who are coming over as part of the U.S. mission and sort of collaboration with the U.S. mission's cultural diplomacy and the UAE Ministry of Culture and Youth?
Actually, no, I don't. I know my group of musicians. Like, in addition to me, we're like 10 other musicians, each one.
Sure. Yeah. Do you want to say shout some of them out?
Yes, please.
Go for it.
You're asking me. Yes. So the director of our music program, his name's Yarub Smeirat. He's an incredible violinist. He's currently one of the head faculty members at Berkeley, Abu Dhabi. And he's kind of been responsible for putting this incredible band together of this melting pot of Arabic musicians based in the UAE or based close by. Some of our key musicians are coming in from Jordan because Yarub's originally Jordanian and has beautiful connections in the music scene there. And then I have one musician who's very dear to me coming with me from the States. He's an American citizen, but he's originally Palestinian. His name's Zafir Tawil. He'll be joining me, and he's going to be the director of the rhythmic section. So I'm very excited to kind of have someone from my local music project to join me
Cool.
over there. And the music program is going to be really exciting. It's going to be a mix of songs that I composed and songs that are like classics that everyone knows and loves from, the golden age of Arabic music. So it should be kind of a fun mix of contemporary and classical.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you a question that people ask when they speak to. This is a standard debate in hip hop circles.
Okay.
But I'm going to apply it to you. When it comes to classical Arabic music, in your opinion, and obviously in no particular order, and this is a completely subjective thing, who is in your top 5, dead or alive?
I would say the top, because my focus is more on composing. There are others who their focus would be on singing or playing an instrument. So because my focus is composing, I would say Muhammad Abdul Wahab.
How come? Before you go through each one of them, how come?
So
make the case.
I think there are like 5 or 6. Let's say there are 10 great Arabic composers. Riyad al-Sumbati, Zakaria Ahmed, Sayyid Darwish. I mean, there are countless incredible classical Arabic composers. But from all of them, I resonate with Abdul Wahab. I think mainly because of the way he wrote his phrases. Like the famous thing everyone says about Abdul Wahab is that, oh yeah, he's known for mixing the West and the East. Because it's known that he would take have a French composer work with him and create this crazy violin section with harmonies that there's no way that existed in the Middle East at the time. And he kind of brought this school to life. But to me, what fascinates me and makes me fall in love with his compositions is his phrasing. His phrases are so clear. There are many other composers that when they write a sentence, a musical sentence, it's not so catchy, or it's not. I think it's very important for Arabic music to be catchy, and to a good composition is one that sticks in your head. So very often, they'll write a sentence that kind of leaves you on too much of a cliffhanger, or that it's very hard to explain because these concepts.
Can you sing an example of one of these phrases that it sticks in your head, you can't get out?
Yeah, for example, بلاش تبوسني في عينيا دي البوسة في العين تفرق يمكن في يوم ترجع ليا والقلب حلمه يتحقق. It's so beautiful and so clear. And then he goes, خلي الوداع من غير عقبال علشان يكون قلبي أمل. It's so beautiful. The way he wrote those sentences, I don't know where he got this inspiration. Of course, there are other composers that also have these incredibly catchy phrases, but I think Abdul Wahab was he has so many. I don't know how he was able to come up with so many incredible phrases like this. And
okay, so that's number 1.
Yeah, I could talk about him all day. So
okay, number 2.
Then the second one. So number 2.
In no particular order.
So we talked about a composer. Now I'll move to a singer. So I think Kulthum, I would say, is my second favorite inspiration. Then after, should I explain why or keep moving?
Yeah, give me a little snippet on why Kulthum.
Kulthum. This is hard to just give one line explaining why, but to me, what draws me to Kulthum and what makes her this legend that's everyone just agrees that Kulthum is the epitome of the greatest Arabic singer.
Let me ask you a precise question on Kulthum, because you could do an hour on it. Okay?
Yes.
What do people misunderstand about her greatness?
Well, I very often hear people, like my Syrian friends, they'll tell me like, oh, I don't like Kulthum's voice. I don't like the sound of it, but I prefer to hear it from George Wassouf, or I prefer to hear Kulthum songs from other singers. Which basically tells me a couple things. One, that for some reason they don't like the tonality of hearing Kulthum. And two, that they love her compositions. Because what does that mean? That somehow they're not able to listen to it on her voice, but the songs are so gorgeous that they're enjoying it on someone else's voice. But I prefer, of course, I love George Wassouf, or so many other singers add something beautiful to singing her songs. But I prefer to hear those songs from Kulthum because, first of all, her knowledge of singing and maqam is like unbelievable because of what she lived through. First of all, she started, and this goes back to how Islam is such an important part of Arabic music, even secular music. She started off as reciting Quran and a master of tajweed. Of course, it's famously known about her that her father would have her dress like a boy when she was young and recite the Quran. So she has this incredible education of tajweed, which translates into the singing. Like her pronunciation of the words, the way she pronounces the consonants and the vowels, it just comes out so strong. Her knowledge of the maqam, the musical system, her knowledge of the ornaments. And what's unique about her is that, like we were talking about before, she has all this knowledge, but she breaks the rules, and she sings from her ahsas, and this is what I love about her singing, like this raw feeling. And sometimes she could be singing the most simple words. It's not like the poetry I'm singing is like historical, and the words are already something in and of itself.
Yeah, they're ornamental already.
Yeah, but sometimes, of course, Kulthum sang amazing qasaid as well. But even in her songs in Amiyya, she's singing the most simple thing, but that raw feeling is so complex and so interesting. And like something I love about her is like that raspiness in her voice, like in the older age. Because also Kulthum, in every decade, she has a voice. Like she didn't sound the same in the 30s as she sounded in the 70s. So like, that raw sound that she has in Inta Umri or Alf Layla, this thick voice, it's unbelievable. So yeah.
I always equated, when I'm speaking to non-Arab friends of mine, I always say that Kulthum is like the prince of the Arab world.
Yeah.
Just prolific, in some cases hard to take in, Like people always say they love listening to Prince songs sung by other people.
Yeah.
Because he's such a genius that he was trying to break rules for himself. He was playing with the forms himself. Okay, so let's keep going. So number 3.
Number 3. I have to think about this one. Who do I love? I've always been very drawn to the voice of Wadi As-Safi, the great Lebanese male singer, who was kind of, he was known to sing lots of duets with the famous Fairuz. He was kind of like, Fairuz was the epitome of the female Lebanese voice, and Wadi' was the epitome of the Lebanese male voice. And, as a Syrian, the accent is so similar. So I'm very drawn to the Lebanese traditional Arabic music. And Abdel Wahab himself said that Wadi' As-Safi is the best Arab voice from all the Arab countries. He's the most ideal voice because of his range. He was able to sing extremely low notes and like the highest notes as well. The flexibility of his voice, something that's very characteristic of Arabic singing is the flexibility of the voice. Actually, here in the States, like recently when we performed at the Met, there were a lot of singers that worked in the Met staff because in Met Live Arts, a lot of the producers are musicians themselves. And they were just like, how do you make your voice spin around like that? Or how do you do these moves? And this is something so that we almost take for granted in the Middle East, that we have these flexible voices. And Wadi' al-Safi was really a master at this, the way he was able to twirl his voice and bend the musical notes. Something like sometimes I would even I'd spend hours just listening to like a 2-second clip of his voice to try to recreate it with my voice. And I would like pause those 2 seconds every half millisecond to try to capture it. And I would go crazy if I couldn't get it. And there are some, even till today, I just can't do them,
Can you give me an example? What are you talking about?
One phrase I worked really hard on from Wadi' al-Safi, he has this very famous mawal called walaw. And it's ataba, it's like this is a traditional of mawawil, like vocal improvisation, where you're kind of mourning a love or mourning something. This is like how you would translate the word ataba. So he sings this one word, walaw, and he spins it around like and contorts it. Is that the word in English? He bends the word in an amazing way. And while he's doing this, he's holding his breath for a very long time. So the phrase goes like, he goes,
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so, as you said, it's not even circular, it's spherical.
Yeah.
Wow, amazing. Okay.
Yeah. So this is part
That's
of his
Wadi' al-Safi. Okay.
And he was a composer as well. He wrote beautiful songs and he wrote beautiful qasa'id. He took some really amazing ancient Arabic poetry, some that we don't even know the author, and composed these, which is also amazing about him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number four.
I'm tempted to say Fairuz because, of course, we have to mention Fairuz.
Okay.
Fairuz, Abd al-Halim.
Is that 4 and 5?
I think so.
Okay.
And maybe I would say something that I love about the two of them that they share.
Sure.
Is the idea of introducing the pretty voice to Arabic singing. Because, Kulthum, Sabah Fakhri, who I probably should have put as 3 or something, maybe with Wadi'. Those singers, the focus was less on how pretty their voice sounded and more the strength and the pronunciation and the perfect intonation and all these things. But something that's unique about Abd al-Halim and Fairuz and why so many people love them is because their voices are so silky and gorgeous.
And delicate, yeah.
And warm and delicate. And kind of Arabic singing has gone more towards this approach lately, with the invention of microphones. Back in the day, a great singer was someone who could project, which is Kulthum's a great example of this. She probably filled the room with her voice. But now that we have microphones, you could sing softly and sweetly, and which is, in a way, more enjoyable for a lot of people. And I just love listening to the delicate touch of Abd al-Halim and Fairuz.
Okay, so if I were to ask you just to wrap up, what are you sort of the single thing that you're most excited about participating in the festival? Why did you accept this position? Why did you accept it? What are you sort of most looking forward to in terms of being part of the entire festival?
Mainly I'm just excited to tarab, this genre, or classical Arabic music, is something so communal and so spiritual. Um, and I'm hoping, and kind of what makes me excited about the project and performing in the UAE, is to kind of have this communal communication between the audience and to kind of experience this music with everyone, and enjoy it together, and kind of, tarab translates as ecstasy, or almost like getting high. So to kind of all get high off this music together, and I'm very much also looking forward to the musicians I've never performed with. Each musician, whether it be the nai or the qanoon, or the oud, they'll each take their solo, and I'll be able to, in a way, be an audience and enjoy listening to those musicians while I'm on stage singing with them. So I'm most excited, to just enjoy music together with everyone. And then, of course, something that's that we discussed before is that my own compositions are so meaningful to me because I'm choosing the poetry based off of things I've been through in my life. And so I'm really excited to kind of see how people react to this new art, or these new pieces that I'm going to present. And then, of course, I'm excited to connect with everyone singing classics. Like we're going to sing, of course, Abd al-Halim and Kulthum and Sabah Fakhri. And we're going to sing this known classical repertoire as well. So I'm looking forward to enjoying that with everyone and kind of see how everyone reacts,
Amazing. Well, I'm also very excited about it. I will be in the audience, and I will be cheering you on.
Nice.
For sure I will.
Amazing.
Well, thanks so much for making the time to talk. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
A real treat for me. And I can't wait to meet in person and to see you do that those spherical singing techniques in person.
Thank you. Looking forward to talking soon. Bye.
Okay, thanks so much. Thank you so much for listening. I hope to see you at the festival. For more information, go to burda.ae. That is burda.ae. The festival runs from December 19th to the 21st at the Dubai Exhibition Center as part of Expo 2020 Dubai. The festival is organized by the Ministry of Culture and Youth, UAE, and this podcast is powered by Afikra Podcasts. Take care.